وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Good morning. US-IRAN-ARAB confrontation. Is it a zero-sum game? While the US escalates maximum pressure on Iran, the Iranian-supported militias and political parties are gaining grounds in Iraq and Lebanese elections. While Iran is being squeezed economically, it is driving a potential wedge between the US and Europe. While it is being hit by Israel in Syria, Iran's ally Bashar al-Assad is capturing more territory in his fragmented country. So where this US-Iran-Arab confrontation is heading, and is it a zero-sum game? We will explore the question and other related issues with three distinguished guests. Professor Raymond Tanter, President of the American Committee on Human Rights and expert on US-Iran relations, journalist Khalil Hachem, editor and publisher of YeahMichigan.com, and Dr. Abdalmajid Katranji, a surgeon and a political analyst. I thought that Mr. Dr. Katranji will be joining us later from Paris, where I understand there is an Iranian opposition conference is being held, but maybe he's joining us just from the US. Before we start the discussion, I would like to request from our audience they can join us with any questions, comments during the conversation here by calling us on 248-557-3300. That's 248-557-3300. Let's start the discussion with the most recent news, and that is Iran is threatening to block the Hormuz Strait in the Middle East. They are saying if we cannot export our own oil, then nobody else can. So I want to see Professor Tanter first, what that would mean.
It would mean quite a great deal if it were the case that Iran blocked the Hormuz Straits. They have fast speedboats that can attack American destroyers. They have the ability to strike even if the United States were to strike back. That said, an American aircraft carrier has several submarines. It has all kinds of capabilities, and Iran will not be able to sustain that for long. And in fact, I wrote an article just recently about the fact that the Iranian Revolution will not be televised. And And there are three quick factors I would like to go over. One is that there's an explosive situation with the falling prices on the real. There's a different government in power in the United States. President Obama was coddling the Iranian regime, and President Trump is issuing Treasury Department and State Department sanctions. And there's an organized opposition in the form of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is a coalition of dissidents. At issue is whether or not the NCRI, as it's called, and I've just left the 110,000 people, had a chance to speak with on several panels of them, whether the NCRI can pull together a coalition of dissidents, and blocking the Hormuz Straits would not be possible if it were the case that the 1970 Iran coalition that the NCRI was a part of, at that time was called the Mujahideen of Haq, were to push the regime, and the regime is likely to back out in that particular situation.
Mr. Khalil Hachem, we know that blocking water straits like the Hormuz Straits, remember in the 60s, 1967, Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser blocked the Strait of Tiran, and that led to the Arab-Israeli War in 1967. Would Iran seriously think or contemplate of blocking the Hormuz Strait?
First, good morning, and thank you, Dr. Gawad, for this really great program and timely program, and good morning to you and to your guests. I strongly doubted that Iran would do that because, first, blocking the Hormuz Strait means it's an escalation of, and it means war. What Secretary Pompeo really delivered a few weeks ago was a platform for war, and I'm assuming that Iran was responding with, if we can't sell our oil, nobody's got to sell their oil, because understanding that this is the economic language that most people understand, the consequences of starting a war in the Middle East that what would lead to. I think it's more of a political gesture than anything else. Also, I mean, Iran could use that as a last resort if Iran is pressured economically to do that. But, blocking the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that you're either in the middle of war or you're going into war.
Dr. Abdalmajid Katranji, I'm not sure whether you are with us right now. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, Dr. Gawad.
Oh, very good, very good. Now, what might be behind the Iranian thinking, their strategy? I mean, the idea that, okay, if we can't sell or if we cannot export our own oil, nobody else can. In other words, Saudi Arabia and Gulf countries who use the strait to export their oil. Now, this is a vital commodity for the entire world, including for Europe. And doesn't Iran need Europe right now?
I think there's going to be an important distinction here, is that we're talking about the Iranian regime as it's currently led in its current form versus the interest of Iran as a country or as a nation. I think that the reality is that there's no question oil is a vital commodity for Iran in of itself, and it's a vital commodity for Iranian people, and the ability to sell oil is a vital issue for them. The biggest thing is, the bottom line is, the person on the street of Iran, the average individual who makes up the society, are they benefiting from the sale of oil? Or are they benefiting from the economic opportunities that would be available to them if the environment politically were better, if they had improved relationships with the United States or with Europe? And the fact of the matter is, regardless of the situation, whether the sanctions are imposed or not imposed, the person on the street, the everyday citizen of Iran, is not gaining or benefiting from the opportunities that would put Iran back with the Society of Nations. And I think that's a critical component. As we watch the protests inside Iran, they are not anti-American protests. They're objections to economic policy by the Iranian regime on its own people. And I think that's a very important component that needs to be studied and analyzed as we look at what's in the best interest of the Iranian people moving forward.
Professor Tanter, I understand there is a meeting today in Europe, in Vienna, I believe, between Iran and the Group of Five. In other words, it used to be a Group 5+1. But now the European, the Chinese, and the Russians are meeting with Iran in Vienna or in Europe. What might come out of that meeting?
Well, I think that meeting is crucial. I had a chance to brief Mike Pompeo when he was a member of Congress, and he knows a great deal about the nuclear deal. He knows about heavy water. He knows that American sanctions can turn the regime around, and if not, there's a high prospect of war. And, in fact, I wrote another article about how President Trump tries to appear to be a madman in the sense that Henry Kissinger was told by Richard Nixon that I want the North Vietnamese to appear to be slightly out of control. And in the game of chicken, as you well know, two cars are speeding toward one another, and one throws the steering wheel out of the window, and the other one has no choice but to swerve. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, thank you for having me on, and I'm a long-time supporter of the University of Michigan, but also Michigan State. So my video on this one is go blue, go green, 16 in 2019.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Professor Tanter. Mr. Khalil Hachem, once again, the meeting between the other parties, excluding the U.S. And Iran, in what way can it help get us, Iran, the U.S., the other parties, out of this potential crisis?
I don't think the U.S. really intends to find a solution with Iran. The driving force of the U.S. right now is the Saudi-Israeli propaganda and goals for how to deal with Iran. The United States has no intention whatsoever of solving any issues with Iran right now. To try to separate people from government this is nonsense. Really, when we're talking about Iran, we're talking about a country. The Iranians decide who the government is, not anybody else. Now, the meeting that we have today is very important, and I think the biggest loser of this is the United States itself. And this could be an indication of either the hegemony of the United States could be breaking away, because if these countries decide, and keep in mind, Iran did not violate any terms of the agreement, whether you like the agreement or not. Iran did not violate any term of the agreement. Now, Iran's behavior in the area, Iran's involvement in Syria, Iran's support of different groups that we don't like, that's a different story. But the agreement itself, Iran didn't violate it, and for the U.S. to withdraw out of that is leaving itself really alone. The other thing is that, there are a lot of companies who are willing to deal with Iran and are not affected by the sanctions. Sanctions never solved anything historically. They do make it difficult for people to operate. Iran has dealt with sanctions for the long time, and Dr. Katranji is right. People may be affected even more than the regime. The regime will not be affected. But, at the end of the day, sanctions really haven't proven to be valuable at all. And in the long term, they really don't work. Sanctions are a form of war. And if you declare war on a country, expect that country to declare war on you. So that meeting that's going on today is a huge. Will Europe finally stand on its own and separate from the hegemony of the United States? It's we're going to find out it's going to happen or not. Then you have two players, which is Russia, and then you have another player, which is China, who are not really affected by or want to challenge the hegemony of the United States. And we'll see what happens today. I think today's meeting is bigger than Iran and bigger than oil. It's about, can these countries challenge the United States or not?
Dr. Katranji, I want to ask you a little later about the Paris conference in which I think you participated. But let me first get a comment from you. Now, you heard Mr. Hachem say Iran did not break the nuclear agreement. So my question is, was the U.S. right in pulling out of the agreement?
I think these agreements always present the challenges because it's much like the debate right now with NAFTA and the United States policy with NAFTA. Are these agreements permanent structures, to be respected every year for, the rest of the time? Or are these agreements basically principles of behavior that need to be revisited every, 2 to 5 years, to be renewed, to be updated and refreshed? I come from a political philosophy that all treaties for any nation, must be honored, but at the same time, they have to be reviewed and refreshed and updated as technologies change, as economics change, as political shifts change. So it's not a simple matter of did they or didn't they violate. I think there's a principle of behavior that was expected from the American perspective with how Iran acts and interacts in the Middle East largely. I do agree with Mr. Hachem is that in of itself, in the strictest interpretation of the treaty, Iran didn't violate the principle. I think the larger issues, and I think they are more global, like Mr. Hachem outlined, that this is a lot about American foreign policy shifting from one dynamic under one president with a very particular political philosophy to another president with a very different dynamic and a very different political philosophy. So it's not an issue necessarily of just right or wrong. It's a matter of some of the global forces that are emerging economically, socially, with currencies, etc., with energy policy as a whole, and how America sees itself fitting in that in those currents over the next 3 to 5 years.
When we come back, we will ask Professor Tanter to explain to us what the U.S. wants. Does it want a regime change or just a new and different agreement? After the break.
Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
كنت أبحث عن اشتراك في خدمة تلفزيونية جديدة، لكن صاحب المتجر أخبرني عن IPTV بوكس والتي تحتوي على القنوات العربية.
ادفع لمرة واحدة فقط واستمتع بالقنوات المميزة مدى الحياة مجانا.
أوه يا له من عرض! لقد ظننت أنني تسرعت في الشراء، وفي غضون أسبوعين بدأت قنواتي المفضلة في الاختفاء. حاولت الاتصال بالشركة، عندها اكتشفت أنه ليس لدي تصريح لمشاهدة القنوات المميزة. يا لها من مضيعة للمال والوقت.
تفضل بزيارة checkyourbox.com اليوم للتأكد من أن جهاز الاي بي تي في بوكس الخاص بك مصرح به، وأن قنواتك المفضلة متاحة وآمنة، ولا تنخدع بالسعر فقط.
When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are talking about the US-Iran confrontation, and my question for Professor Tanter is about what the U.S. wants. Does it seek a regime change in Iran, or is it just looking for an improved version of the nuclear agreement deal that would include also Iran's activities in the Middle East plus the missile issue? Professor Tanter.
Yes. I was also at the Paris conference, and to say that Iran did not break a nuclear agreement is not true, because it's a political commitment that can be expanded to include Iran's meddling in Yemen, resulting in Saudi bombing Iran's overflights of Iraq, to threaten Syria, and Afghan and Pakistani freedom fighters are fighting and dying on behalf of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. So, to answer the question, the United States wants both regime change and a different agreement. You don't have a binding. The agreement was not a treaty. It was formalized under UN Security Council Resolution 2231. But that is part, and that becomes part of international law. But it's not binding on the United States with respect to breaking it. As you can see how President Trump is imposing sanctions, Treasury Department and State Department sanctions on China, even though there was a political commitment to refrain from doing so. President Trump wants to put maximum pressure on the Iranian regime so that he can get both regime change as well as the ability to expand that political commitment to include, as I said, meddling in Iran or in Syria, in meddling in Yemen, meddling in Iraq, and in Syria. By the way, Iraq doesn't have an air force, so Syria uses its airspace, Iraq's airspace, to transfer Afghan and Pakistani freedom fighters, so-called, who are fighting and dying there in Syria, and in control of most of Lebanon, which, in terms of the number of seats in the Parliament of Lebanon.
You know, agreements are agreements. I mean, if you don't like them, it doesn't mean that they're not agreements. The nuclear agreement is bound by an independent body. There's 6 nations that are involved with this, and the agreement was about nuclear. It was not about Iran's behavior. Now, this is one thing. The other thing is, if we want to modify the agreement to include somebody else's behavior, that's a different story. But to say that it's not true actually is not true, because the agreement was about nuclear activities in Iran. It is not about its behavior. And Iran's behavior is no different than anybody else's behavior in the area. You know, you have the Saudi behavior, you have the American behavior, you have everybody's behavior. And I'm not justifying the Iranian behavior and their support for the different factors, but agreements are agreements. And if we want to modify it, we don't just cancel it and ignore all our partners. You know, that's just madness. You know, and the other thing is that, you know, the personality of and Dr. Katranji mentioned something very important, which is the personality of the leader that's, you know, that are now driving this issue, which is President Trump. I think this is a very important issue, that President Trump is motivated by different factors. And I think Iran missed an opportunity immediately after the Korean meeting, the North Korean meeting. Iran could have really used that opportunity to challenge Mr. Trump for a meeting and solve this issue, because Mr. Trump is motivated by his ego, and that would have played very well for that. And I think Iran missed that opportunity, and I wish that, Iran took advantage of that. Again, Iran's behavior in the area is no different than anybody else's. It's an influence thing. We have Iran, we have Saudi Arabia, we have Israel, we have the United States, we have Russia. You know, all of these factors in there. For us to focus on one behavior only is really not the complete story, and it's not really, it doesn't tell the entire story.
Dr. Katranji, any comment?
Well, I think that becomes the larger issue at hand, is that Iran is not unique in a lot of its behavior. I think that if we're going to make this an assessment on good behavior in the Middle East, it's going to be very difficult to find any people or any group, particularly other than NGOs that work on economic development levels at specifically, for instance, in terms of microfinancing, where you could say, okay, now we're seeing some very good action and good players. I do agree with both Professor Tanter and Professor Hachem that there's a dynamic here with regards to this agreement, that a dimension to it, that on the one hand, it's an agreement, it's not a treaty. There is some binding here, but at the same time, it makes it very accessible to revise. And number two, from Mr. Hashem's perspective, that I think Iran did miss an opportunity. I think when they saw how Trump behaved toward North Korea, Kim Jong-un, they should have responded in kind of a similar fashion to understand that this is a new reality. You have to understand America is a democracy. Every 4 and every 8 years, it's a very different country. At the same time, that the forces that need to be addressed here are the forces of stability and opportunity. And also, I think the forces or the opportunity for dissent. I think at times those things are picked one in lieu of the other in the hopes that it will change and improve things. And I think that as a matter of policy toward Iran, both Iran towards its neighbors and the America toward Iran, one has to look at what's in the best interest of Iran. Is it exporting conflicts to Yemen, to Syria, to other parts of the world, to move people from Afghanistan and Pakistan, like Professor Tanter outlined? Or is it better for Iran to start saying, you know what, let's get onto the global market and let's create a new Silicon Valley. Let's develop new technologies to compete in the global marketplace. China's success has been that it shifted away from exporting this philosophy of communism and really entered the world marketplace technologically to become a huge influential factor. And I think that's an example that several of these countries have got to understand, and that doesn't happen with regimes that engage in policies that still function as if the 60s and 70s still exist. So I think that some of these issues and matters have to be discussed, moving everybody forward into the next century.
If I may add just one thing here, I think Dr. Katranji is absolutely right, but that's not the complete story. If we're going to analyze Iran's behavior of exporting its philosophy into the area, we also need to analyze Wahhabism and Saudi Arabia's behavior into exporting into its theology into the area, and then Israel's influence into the area. The issue is that we're not looking at it in a comprehensive way. And if we try and our approach to really analyze it in a more comprehensive way, I think more people would be on our side. If we try to tell Iran and Saudi Arabia and Israel, listen, you can't do this and you can't do that, and this is not in the benefit of everybody, let's everybody get along, then we will get much further. But when we take sides because of whatever reason that we have, and we just want to tell Iran don't do this, and then we can allow Saudi Arabia to do that, then we can allow Israel to bomb Syria every day and do whatever they need to do. We're going to end up with no credibility at all, no matter how powerful we are.
Well, but remember, I said that at the beginning of my statement, Hashu, is that since the conversations about Iran, there's no question the exportation of ideologies and philosophy and the meddling in other affairs as handled by Saudi Arabia is also of concern. And oftentimes some of those behaviors run counter to the interests of the United States specifically. So my comments were in the very beginning stated that when you're looking at some of the other players also, their behavior has to be addressed. But since we're talking Iran specifically, I centered my comments around Iran. But
absolutely.
I think
and that's a behavioral problem, but it is a regional problem and needs to be dealt regionally, not individually. Because if we deal with it individually, then we're targeting one country, then becomes a totally different dynamic. If we were going to get, and same thing with the nuclear issue, we want to tell Iran.
Gentlemen, we have a hard break coming up now.
Yeah, I think we want to tell Iran we cannot you cannot have nuclear weapon, but we can allow Israel to have nuclear weapon. We can allow Saudi Arabia to have nuclear weapon. It doesn't work out that way. Let's all work to have the Middle East a nuclear-free country. Then we can get somewhere.
When we come back to the discussion, we will hear from Dr. Tanter about what he thinks the other party, Saudi Arabia, should do politically in the crisis. After the break.
The Rama Relief Foundation provides humanitarian aid into areas inside of war-torn Syria, as well as aid to the refugees who have fled to the neighboring countries in the Middle East. The foundation offers food baskets, container shipment, mental health, education, soup kitchens, and more. Go to ramarelief.org or call 248-990-4247. Any donation amount made to Rama will go to sustaining many lives. Call now 248-990-4247.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the US-Iran confrontation. And Professor Tanter, Mr. Hachem referred a minute ago, he said basically that Iran's behavior is no different from other parties' behavior, Saudi Arabia, for example. Now, my question is, given the fact that Iran is under extreme pressure right now, why don't the other parties, the Arabs, Saudi Arabia, Gulf states, take this opportunity and maybe take an initiative, political initiative, talk with Iran about possible ideas to resolve its behavior and the war in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon. Why don't Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries do that?
Yes, I'm so pleased you brought up Yemen, because I just gave a talk at a panel in Brussels for the Yemen Human Rights Council, and there's a center for the study of human rights, and they asked me because I run a think tank called the American Committee on Human Rights. Harry Truman once said that these may be SOBs, but there are SOBs. So Saudi Arabia belongs to the American coalition. It is bombing in Yemen as a result of Iranian provocations. Saudi Arabia is not guiltless on this issue, but you have the situation where Iran controls the airspace of Iraq. Iraq does not have an air force. And the Iranian regime can go through the air unhindered, except for ISIS type of attacks, Islamic State, unhindered to meddle, to interfere in the lives of the Syrians in Lebanon, which controls the majority, if you will, of the Iranian parliament now. So the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is the problem. Israel is not the problem. The United States is not the problem. Iran is the problem. And you remember when President Trump used the term rocket man against Kim Jong-un? Well, Kim Jong-un came to the table, and he's trying to cheat on the denuclearization, as his grandfather and his father did as well. But he came to the table. And I think what Mike Pompeo's 12-point plan does is to give the ability for the United States to put maximum pressure on Iran, just as it put maximum pressure on North Korea to bring it to the table.
Well, Mr. Hachem,
Dr. Jawad
is the problem.
Yes. I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, the issue of Yemen, this is not a new issue. Saudi Arabia and Yemen have been at war since the 50s. Since Jamal Abdel Nasser, and you know this pretty well, Dr. Jawad. This is not a new issue over there. The issue of Lebanon, this is a conflict that's been going on since 1948. When Palestinians were driven by Israel into Lebanon, and the groups that Iran supports in Lebanon, they're only the latest kid on the block. Israel has been bombing and occupying and attacking Lebanon since 1948. And it engaged the Lebanese army, engaged the Lebanese social parties, and engaged the Palestinians, and engaged everyone. The issue in Lebanon is Israel's ambitions to occupy and annex southern Lebanon. This is the issue. And then to go back to Iran and the United States, let's not forget history. Let's not forget 1953, when the United States and the CIA led coup to remove the Iranian democratic elected government and replace it with the Shah. And who is the Shah? Was a dictator. He was our dictator. Okay? And we supported him. And then on and on and on. And we supported Iraq and Saddam Hussein, and we even gave him chemical weapons to attack Iran. And we did that. Right now, the United States supports and carries on the war against Yemen. If we're going to talk about human rights, who's killing women and children there? Iran is only the latest, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Iran is only the latest country to support the Yemeni in Yemen. But this conflict has been going on for a long time. And we can stop that madness overnight. And we don't want to do that. We're driving Yemen into famine, whether it's the United States or Iran or anybody else. But at the end of the day, it's the people who are suffering. Same thing in Syria. Who are the people who are suffering, really? It's the Syrian people. Do we have a plan, whether it is Obama or Mr. Trump or anybody else, do we have a plan to really make a change in Syria? No, we don't. Mr. Obama looked the other way, and now Mr. Trump is not really doing enough. Okay? The issue is the average person suffers. And just like Dr. Katranji said earlier, in Iran, who is suffering? The Iranian people. The regime doesn't suffer. The Syrian regime is not suffering. And if somebody else comes in, it's going to be another regime. And now the Saudis, go to Saudi Arabia and see the poverty there. Okay? We don't want to just take a look at the ruling parties. Just because our friends, we should look the other way. What kind of policy is this? Really, it's not a good policy.
Professor Tanter.
Yes, I have been to Yemen, and I have taken a tour of all of the different wars in Yemen. Yes, the Yemeni people are suffering. I don't know whether my colleagues have been to Yemen. I've been there, and I'm going back once the security situation clears again. I've been to Iran. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Syria. And I'm going back to these countries as part of a tour set up by the Yemeni National Center for the Study of Human Rights. So I have first-hand knowledge on the ground. As a member of the National Security Council staff in the Reagan Bush administration, I've been to some of these countries, and I just submit that I have a bit more credibility in answering the question about Yemen, about Iraq, about Iran. I've been there, done that. I'm not a newbie in this business.
Yeah, there's something very important. Just because somebody doesn't visit the country, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have the credibility to answer a question. We all do analysis. We all do studies. We all follow issues. And just because somebody visits a country doesn't mean that person has a credibility. How many people went to Iraq, and all of their, Americans and American scholars went to Iraq, and all of the analysis were really wrong. So just because somebody visits this country doesn't give him the credibility to really answer, or somebody doesn't have the credibility to answer.
Dr. Katranji, I'm going to ask you when we have this brief break in a minute, about the opposition, the conference in Paris, what you had to say, but also whether the U.S. is encouraging the opposition toward the objective or an objective of a regime change when we come back.
بدأناه معكم وعاهدناكم على أن نستمر بمزيد من المتعة والعروض الحصرية على قناتي زي ألوان وزي أفلام. زي ألوان هي أول وأكبر قناة مسلسلات عربية هندية في أمريكا. أضخم الإنتاجات، مسلسلات حصرية، ومع زي أفلام فأنتم على موعد مع مغامرة جديدة كل يوم لاكتشاف سحر بوليوود. تابعوا حصريا قناتي زي ألوان وزي أفلام الآن في أمريكا على ديش نتورك وسلينج تي في.
كنت أبحث عن اشتراك في خدمة تلفزيونية جديدة، لكن صاحب المتجر أخبرني عن IPTV بوكس والتي تحتوي على القنوات العربية.
ادفع لمرة واحدة فقط واستمتع بالقنوات المميزة مدى الحياة مجانا.
يا له من عرض! لقد ظننت أنني تسرعت في الشراء، وفي غضون أسبوعين بدأت قنواتي المفضلة في الاختفاء. حاولت الاتصال بالشركة، عندها اكتشفت أنه ليس لدي تصريح لمشاهدة القنوات المميزة. يا لها من مضيعة للمال والوقت.
تفضل بزيارة checkyourbox.com اليوم للتأكد من أن جهاز IPTV بوكس الخاص بك مصرح به وأن قنواتك المفضلة متاحة وآمنة، ولا تنخدع بالسعر فقط.
I am Atef Abdel Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the US-Iran confrontation. And my question now goes to Dr. Katranji, who has just attended a major opposition conference in Paris, France. Dr. Katranji, tell us briefly about the opposition conference in Paris.
I think it was an impressive conference from my perspective. It's definitely got its elements of pageantry and I think presentation to kind of outline the themes that the opposition expresses. But I think on the deeper level that there were policy conferences going on. There was high-level multi-nation communication going on and a relationship dynamic so that the opposition isn't just simply the term opposition in the sense that they're against something, but they have clear and formulated plans and structures that they're about something. And very specifically, they're about a representative government in Iran in which people throughout the country can participate and not necessarily are selected, not basically participating under the permission of the oligarchy that currently runs the country, but a larger, more representative system to allow voices that are otherwise not heard of in Iran to be able to present itself. So I was impressed by the depth and the depth of the work of this coalition, and I know that there's people who in the media or other analysts that are just trying to make this about one group versus another group. But in interacting in this conference, one, you were impressed that this was actually a large number of groups, several groups, but they were behaving in a manner cohesively and collectively to present a viable alternative rather than just simply being against something. And much credit goes to them, especially because even though several European countries may still be currently honoring the treaty, it was impressive that several countries from Europe, including the European Parliament and France itself, allowed this conference to occur in Europe, and had also at the same time had representatives, direct or indirect, speaking there. I think even Professor Tanter was present there at the conference.
And Dr. Katranji, what is that viable alternative?
Well, I think what they outlined was simply this. This isn't just simply a matter of, hey, let's grab your gun and blow everything up to change government, to change regime. What it is basically outlining that there's a overwhelming level of interest, not simply from international exiles, but from within the country itself, that's seeking to change the current structural dynamic, to shift away from the oligarchy that's kind of in control of Iran, to more empower the elected dynamic that exists in Iran. They do have elections, and they do have people that are elected, some of them who oftentimes don't necessarily hold the interest of the oligarchy, But where the NTRI stands is it actually wants that elected form of government to be the authority for the voice of the Iranian people, not just certain figures within Iran that seem to be there for a very, very long time, and furthermore, to allow voices of dissent and opposition. You know, an opposition is a good thing. It's a healthy thing for a government. It allows for a country to change, to evolve, and to adapt to new economics. And I think that's where you see this opposition, I think, given the opportunity, would largely be successful.
I hope my colleagues
in a country like Iran.
I can make a quick comment before we go off the air.
Go ahead.
I was present when Maryam Rajavi, the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance Iran, gave her 10-point plan for bringing democracy to Iran. In fact, the name of the conference was Free Iran in Paris 2018. And I was on the platform with Mayor Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York City, and I was one of the U.S. dignitaries to join Giuliani. And there was a speech by Speaker Newt Gingrich and a speech by former Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico. So I want to echo views of my colleague on this particular issue that Iran regime it's necessary to change Iran's regime before war becomes the only other alternative. John Bolton was there last year. Now he's National Security Advisor. And he has been going there for 10, 15 years. And that's where I got to know him. So I'm convinced that the Iranian regime is going to be under maximum pressure, just as North Korea was with respect to Rocket Man.
And Dr. Katranji, is the U.S. helping you, supporting the opposition toward an objective of regime change? Any concrete support?
Well, I think there were numerous countries. I mean, we're not just talking the United States. I mean, there were dozens of countries that were present at this conference at various levels. They held policy meetings, policy briefs. Most of the images people saw were the big assembly of tens of thousands of people there. But beyond that, at several other locations in Paris, there were negotiations with different countries about if the NTRI were then to become established, what would be the transitional government, what would be the process. So I do think that the United States would be working to advance the cause of a coalition of individuals that hold the interests of Iran as a country, as a nation, and its people at heart, but would be more in alignment with what with who the United States could do business with. So I do think there's an opportunity for collaboration, and I think there's an opportunity for communication there and consultation. So it was definitely an impressive thing. And I think what's important here too, this wasn't a conference about what happened 70 or 80 years ago, or what happened 30 or 40 years ago. This was a conference about what can be done for the future. And I think that's a lesson that Iran itself, the Iranian regime right now, needs to understand, and to a larger part, different parts of the Middle East, is we need to move forward as a region. The conflicts of the past are in the past. You can't change history, but you can certainly improve the future.
Mr. Hachem, do you think that Iran is trying to place a wedge between the U.S. and Europe, and can it succeed?
I don't think Iran is. I think President Trump is doing it by himself. Iran could manage to capitalize on that crack between the United States and Europe, but it'll be a short game. And I agree with Dr. Katranji said earlier. Iranians need to change their country on the inside. Not. We have no business of regime change. It's not our job to tell Iranians what kind of government to have. It's not our job to tell the Iranians, you can't have that guy, you can have this guy. And we've done it before in Iran, and we failed miserably. We've done it in Iraq, and we failed miserably. We're doing it everywhere else, and we're failing miserably. It's not up to anybody to decide what other people, that kind of government they want to have. So the idea is that, and I wish that Iran would allow more dissent in the country, and the Iranians will organize themselves and improve themselves. Also, Iran needs to come into grip with the nuclear issue. Do they really need nuclear power or not? If they do,
maximum pressure on Iran so that it
maximum pressure
from within.
We're in no position to put maximum pressure on anybody. We don't have the credibility to do that. Nobody's going to listen to us. Nobody's going to listen to us. So what we need to do is we need to allow the opposition on itself to work on the inside Iran to really make changes slowly and improve from within. We cannot impose a government on the Iranians. We've done it before, and it was miserable. Could Iran take advantage of that crack between the U.S. and Europe? They could, but that's short-lived.
Professor Tanter, you wanted to say something before we end the program. Have you said it, or here is maybe less than 1 minute left?
That there were 110,000 people present at the conference, and there were breakout groups. I spoke on some of the panels in the breakout groups, and I conducted interviews of some of the 110,000 people, including the deputy director of the National Council of Resistance in the United States, Elireza Zefarzadeh, and other people. So it's very important to know that no one's talking about going to war. No one's telling what the Iranian people should do, but they're trying to support them for regime change from within.
Professor Raymond Tanter, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Khalil Hachem, and thank you, Dr. Abdalmajid Katranji, and I will see you again the first Friday next month. Have a good day.